Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to our participants and our special guests, and of course, our resource speaker this afternoon. This is a special webinar discourse. This is entitled Narratives and Responses Towards Building a Culture of Peace. To start with, let us have our community prayer, and after which, we shall be singing the Philippine National Anthem.
Lord, let your servant go in peace, for your word has been fulfilled. Lord, let your servant go in peace, for your word has been fulfilled. A child shall be born to the Virgin, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. Lord, let your servant go in peace, for the word has been fulfilled. My own eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all men. Lord, let your servant go in peace, for your word has been fulfilled. The night shall reveal to the nations, and the glory of your people Israel. Lord, let your servant go in peace, for your word has been fulfilled. Lord, let your servant go in peace, for your word has been fulfilled. Let your servant go in peace. ang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiging sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang lihilang, tiyak na ng magiging, sa manlulupin, di na masisingin, sa naganap tutok sa simulat, sa langit o bagaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Sa pagkawal mo'y tagumpay ka nagtitigil, ang tutuwin na parang niya, kailan huwag kayo nagtitigil. Walang araw na buhay natin magsimula, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang ligaya ng pagkaibang amin, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
To welcome us all to this webinar discourse, may I call on our very energetic Dean of the PCO College of Criminology and of course our first batch of postdoc in the strategy, management, and leadership, our very own General Leocaldo Santiago Jr. Good afternoon, Dean Leo. You're muted. Dean, you're muted.
Nakamute kayo, sir.
Thank you so much, Doc Matt. And welcome to everybody. In this time of pandemic, issues about what affects not only ourselves but around us are of great value. And whether we like it or not, we are one country, and there are issues that could have been exploited for the advantage of everybody, but have been relegated to misunderstanding or issues that have been biased among us for varied circumstances or reasons. For those who have been in the service, we all know that the bias that some people have in other parts of the country affects other areas. Like when you go to the north, they have a different perspective. When you go to the Visayas, they also you can say a different practices on them. Then on the south or in Mindanao area, for those who have not been there, would have a very big bias or cannot understand a lot of things, and they will just refer mostly to stories. So we are having this webinar, and especially we requested our guest, which would be presenting us his experiences, not only about cultural matters that affect part of our country, but the possible bridges that could be constructed to unite us as one and make this peace fruitful and beneficial to everybody. So in behalf of Philippine Christian University, especially our President, Junifen Gawan, we welcome you all to this special webinar, which our honored speaker granted us an opportunity. Actually, nung I heard him talk of all things, not in the Philippines, but in Singapore, that's the time that I said I have to have an opportunity to invite him and share his knowledge to PCU friends and other outside of PCU to listen to his discourse. Once again, welcome, and I hope that we take note, and hopefully we can use it in our profession.
Thank you.
Doc
Thank you.
Ma?
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Jen Leo, for that welcome address. And I think it's clear that we are here, hopefully, to be agile, no, in rebuilding or building a culture of peace. This is one of the webinar series that we have planned, and hopefully matters will be discussed as we progress in this webinar discourse that we design. We are, again, as mentioned by our president here for the group, Dr. Leo, about the speaker this afternoon. Let me give a short introduction. I think you can Google this introduction in the website. And I would like to reiterate by mentioning these words coming from Prof, no? Which describe our resource speaker this afternoon. Our resource speaker, Professor Dato Yusuf Roque Santos Morales, is a senior fellow at the Institute for Comparative and Advanced Studies Philippines, ICASPhils. He is also a consultant with the Ateneo de Zamboanga University, lecturer at the Islamic Studies, Sociology, and Strategic Research, and a member of the Board of Advisors of Al-Kalam Institute for Muslim Identities in Southeast Asia at the Ateneo de Davao University. He was also a contributor of Minda News, one of the leading news portals in Mindanao, recognized as one of the leading subject matter experts on radicalization and preventing and countering violent extremism, PCVE, in the Philippines. He facilitated the formulation of the Philippines National Action Plan for PCVE and the National Consolidating Workshop for the National Task Force on Ending Communist Armed Conflict, NTF-LCAP. He also convened the Consortium of Peace Builders, a network of religious leaders, public intellectuals, non-governmental organizations, CSOs, and people's organizations that supported the Philippine government's PCBE drive. Today, the Consortium of Peace Builders is a nationwide initiative. Prior to his appointment as a commissioner of the National Commission on Muslim Filipinos, NCFMF, Professor Yusuf Morales worked with defense and law enforcement officers to understand radicalization and extremism through social dynamics and peace building. His research interests are peace building, culture studies, developmental security studies, governance, and Islamic studies. And he has written essays on international journals. Without further ado, let me welcome you to our resource speaker, no other than Prof. Dato Yusuf Roque Santos Morales. Good afternoon, Prof.
Yes, magandang hapon. Good afternoon to everyone. Just allow me to share my screen
Go ahead.
para maging mas ano. Okay, so magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. I retitled the topic so that it would be more informal, at the same time it would allow us spaces from where our perspectives would come from. So the theme of our conversation would be conversations toward building a culture of peace, which connects with everything that the objective of the webinar talks about. But before we start with that, I'd like to share something, which is, now this is the major problem when you are not familiar with. Hold on for a moment po. I will try to how do we say For a moment lang po, for a moment lang. Uh, okay. Pause share. Okay, so before we begin our conversations, I'd like to present something as a reference point because whenever we talk about peace, there is another thing. Everyone has their own personal concept or ideas of peace as well as solutions in attaining peace. So before we move on forward, kindly read together with me silently the following story. So that's the major question. Why instead of decreasing, the cobras keep on increasing? Okay, so I hope at the end of the story that we have read, there is a very special message. Those who have been working with the uniform service can immediately connect with this story, especially those who have worked in Mindanao. I know Dean Leo can attest to this. Now, um, I'd like to highlight that we will not discuss government or any programs or even creating here. One. So, number two, we will not be talking about organizations and their activities. We will also not discuss what has failed because uh, when we try to discuss what has failed, well, that means that we have not realized what was being wrong. But we would like to focus more on the narratives, on the stories, the messaging, and the wisdom behind. Because as of the present, there are so many programs around, but how to connect with the programs at the same time create the necessary narratives to bring on the ground to the masses, to schools, that is the major challenge. So, what would we be talking about? Number one, I'd like to open the conversation to the history and origin as a people. We, the Filipino people as a people. Number two, I'd like to open the conversation to COSA, the causes of social hate and anger. Because, as always, people easily get angry but they do not understand what drives that anger. Uh, I remember Syed Hussein Nasser saying that the world today is a postmodern world. We have already gone beyond modernity. But this world is a world of anger. And children were born angry. So, what are we driving? Meaning, it's easy to light a powder keg of conflict because of anger. People were born angry. Now, considering this, the conversation should be from building what we have and what we see, because if we know the history and origin of the people and we understand what drives the powder keg, then perhaps we can form a new framework for peace and nation building. Because you cannot build a culture of peace if you do not also build the nation. They always work hand in hand. They are mirror images of each other. You cannot create a peaceful country if that country does not know and understand itself. So the first is our history and origins as a people. It's important to understand that since time immemorial, since the establishment of the Filipino Republic, there were many narratives that were crafted in order to justify that we are one people. Some of them, of course, we are familiar. The 10 Datos, the Maharlika Nation Theory, the pygmy, the yellow, and the brown man. Very racist ang narrative kasi first the pygmy came in, the Aitas, and then the yellow man, which is the Indonesians, and then the brown man, the Malay people. When in fact, this is also another narrative that was created to perpetuate racism at the same time, as well as other academic narratives created by scholars. So with uh, this had created a certain level of pseudo realities which allowed centralism, meaning policy coming from one place, Manila, and people are disempowered and they are unable to do anything about it because they are not even sure of what identity to assume. But what is the actual reality on the ground? Ang totoo niyan, we are a multicultural people. Whether we like it or not, when we look at our 8 primal ancestors, because every person among indigenous peoples, I am a member of an indigenous peoples communities, we must be able to trace our 8 ancestors to be able to show our ultimate roots. Every one of us, when we trace our 8 ancestors, it is impossible to be coming from just one single tribe or race. A lot of us would say that we have Chinese blood, we have Spanish blood, we have Arab blood, all throughout our 8 ancestors. In a way, it will only show that we are multicultural as a people. Number 2, before uh, before the white man came, if we would use Western reference points, we were already a people and a civilization. Several civilizations, which means that each civilization in the Philippines existed as an independent people, as a nation. And therefore, the Filipino nation is not just one nation, but several nations into one political superstructure. And thus, we have so much things to talk about, and we have so many differences. So, we have to accept that we are a multicultural people, and that we have so many things that we are different from each other. And this is because from the Sri Visaya to the Majapahit to the Islamization and Christianization of our peoples, we have created 3 types of people which are composed also of individual nations. The Lumads, the non-Islamized IPs who have not accepted Islam and remain assuming their own personality and not surrendering to Islam or Christianity. Then the Islamized indigenous peoples, which we are part of, as well as those who have decided to accept the incoming Christianization effort. Now, despite all of this, if we look at the diversity that we have so many common values to speak of. Our differences may be because of where we are located as a people. A lot of our people are based upland. There are those who are living in the rivers. There are those who are staying in the coastal areas. And so our culture is dependent upon the geography that we come from. But when we look at the core values as a people, we have so many things in common. Looking at the common good of people, bayanihan, working together for the community, how to resolve conflict. if you look at all of the un-Islamized and even the Islamized communities, the IP communities, although the terminologies are different, but the processes they use in order to resolve a conflict are all similar. Even the rituals may be different, but the processes and the principles behind are all almost one connected after the other. Now, what is the wisdom in all of this? It means that because one of the major reasons why people are confused is they do not have a connect to the past. The Philippines has recently celebrated 500 years of Christianity. However, has the Philippines celebrated the 2,000 years of Lumad civilization and the 700 years of Islam in the country? So, with this, it only shows that we have not yet come fully to terms with what and who we are without accessing this civilizational resource that we have. We cannot move forward and implement a culture of peace. Now, what are the causes of social hate and anger? Of course, these are the triggering mechanisms. Well, for those of us who are familiar with leftist propaganda, normally we call this IPO, ideological, political, and organizational issues that are exploited during the day. So generally, the causes of social hate and anger in the country, of course, number one is the narrative of historical injustices. When the foreigners came in, and then when the foreigners left, it was the Central Manila and those who were in government and those who were in the upper classes that perpetuated this. Number two, the socioeconomic imbalances. Number three, exploitative environmental policies that damage our economy. Number four, of course, the class system that was established in order to have governance. And lastly, economics that were controlled by a problematic domestic and foreign policy. Well, napakataas ng mga terminolohiya, pero kung isusumahin natin para sa simpleng terminology, ganito lang po yung labas niya. Lupa, pagkain, pamamahay, the right to decent livelihood, the right to housing. Of course, I am not using this to say that I support this activist. What I am saying is, yung previous slide na napaka-technical na causes of social hate and anger can easily be demonstrated by the following images. Which means that people are angry because they are unable to experience social justice. Yun ang nasa isip nila. But at the same time, unable to understand how to resolve their problems as a community. Laging may tinitingnan, there should be an enemy. From the perspective of sociologists, people who have problems in society would have to find a boogeyman to demonize. And in this context, the boogeyman that these people have seen is the state, when in fact, the boogeyman actually is themselves. Now, if we look at it, what are the issues causing conflict? Of course, number one is when basic needs of the people are not addressed, then it is easy to agitate them. Number two is when the people are unhappy with governance, then it is also easy to agitate them. When policies affecting the majority is unacceptable, it is easy to agitate them. However, one would tend to ask this question: why is it that in more advanced societies, in what we call first world countries, they don't experience as much as social disruption as we countries in the third world. It is because of the following. Number one is, as a people, we have unresolved issues. We do not have concrete control of our identity. The 4 centuries of conflict has not allowed us to consolidate our identity, and we were unable to create a culture of peace during the 4 centuries. As such, we are unable to build and move forward as a nation because we do not have a common basis of unity. Now, these are very heavy terms. Napakabigat ng mga terms na ito. But if we continue in our discussions, you would see that the solution to many of these issues is actually just lying there. Now, remember that when we plan programs or we want to put out a policy, we simply do not just decide what to put. Ibig sabihin, hindi po ito just simply pointing, these are the things that we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is important to understand that to be successful in peace building or nation building, we must always take our values from within ourselves, our people, our culture, our civilization. Most of the time, when external facilitators come into areas and try to solve their problems and bringing an outside perspective without taking into consideration the values that that community possesses, hindi nagiging successful yung pag-process, pag-facilitate, pag-end ng conflict sa area. Likewise, as a people, if we have not yet understood the type of values we have, we cannot fully enjoy the benefits of a nation or even to build it because we have not yet accepted the reality of who we are as a people. Many of us in the age of globalization would try to assume many elements of foreign influence. Of course, we have to accept that. Yung K-pop, J-pop, what else? China pop. So all of these foreign influences coming in, and we have not yet built a mechanism how to protect ourselves from foreign influences when we have not yet assumed what our basic core identity is as a Filipino. Kaya madali lang mawaglit. Konting agitation lang, galit agad because this springs from our inability to understand and know who we are. Now, what's the culture of peace? Siguro, the UNESCO preamble tells us that the war begins in the minds of men. Therefore, the defenses of peace must be constructed in the minds of men. And this can only be possible if we are able to define ourselves what we are as a people. We cannot move on forward whether this is for peace and development kapag hindi natin kilala ang sarili natin ng lubusan. Now, in the early 2000s, the Filipino, in response to the UNESCO challenge that we need to develop a culture of peace, developed a Filipino framework for moving forward in a culture of peace. Now, of course, the culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, traditions, modes of behavior, ways of life that reflect and inspire certain values such as the respect for life. At the same time, respect for human rights, rejection of conflict, prevention of conflict by taking into consideration what are the causes of conflict, what are the root causes, and then engaging in dialogue and negotiations. At the same time, having commitment to full participation of the processes of peace, promotion of rights and welfare, of equal rights and welfare of both men and women, and recognition of the right to expression, opinion, and information. Now, this framework was actually called out from the writings of Bishop Tony Ledesma. I think he was then Bishop of Cagayan de Oro City. Now, if you look at the different elements of the culture of peace, you can see that in our value system, from the different indigenous cultural communities, they reflect. Number one is the value of family. Number two is respect for democratic processes. Now, some of us would tend to say that democracy is not a Filipino value. But the practice of consensus building, the practice of getting mutual agreement over important issues, the practice of respecting the rights of others. If you look at these three cardinal concepts, which is the concepts of the katutubo, this is actually a process of consensus building and democratic processes. So, ibig sabihin, even in our most basic cultural belief system, human rights and democracy is a reflective value among Filipinos. Poverty reduction and environmental protection goes hand in hand among indigenous cultures in the Philippines. For them, to be able to ensure that no one goes hungry, that simply means that the environment must be protected. If the environment is protected, then no one will have to fight over resources. As a result, conflict is not exactly avoided but minimized to mere dialogues and conversations. Disarmament, cessation of hostilities, intercultural and solidarity and understanding, well, likas po sa mga katutubo yung pang-unawa sa paniniwala at kultura ng ibang tribo. If we accept this basic practice of mutual respect and acceptance, which is a basic tenet of practice among the indigenous cultural communities, it would be easier for us to engage with those who we do not have similar belief systems with. This would also mean that we are always open to avoiding conflict, de-escalation of conflict, at the same time assisting in cessation of hostilities when some conflict happens. So if you look at these 6 major elements, you would see 6 values also, which is spirituality, which the Filipino is basically endowed with. Number 2 is the concept of justice, of which every Filipino has. This is rooted in the indigenous people's value of being just. Compassion, which is not only compassion for human beings, but for other creations. Dialogue as a way of life, which means that even if we do not agree with the perspective of others, we would still be open and would be respectful of them. Active non-violence, in a way that we always try to achieve an objective without using by force of arms. And stewardship. There is one important value present among the different indigenous cultural communities, which I have tried to find a word, but I could only find an Arabic word which is used by the Islamized peoples. It's called Khilafatul Ard, the steward or vice regent of the earth. Now, yung ating mga ninunong katutubo from their perspective that the earth is a trust given unto us, and therefore it is our obligation to make sure that we take care of it, everything in the environment, living things, and most especially our relationship with other people. Because if we are unable to take care of these relationships, this results in conflict. This results in misunderstanding, and eventually this results to more violence. So if you look at the Filipino framework of the culture of peace, it is highly rooted in the nature of our indigenous cultural traditions. I remember Father Tony talking during the Bishops Ulama Forum that a lot of his realizations in developing this concept was actually hinged with his engagement with the Islamized and non-Islamized indigenous peoples. And part of that realization was, if this was to be used as the primary pillars to build a nation, then perhaps it could help them move forward by accepting who they are in the past, the present, and the future. Now, using this as a framework, how do we build forward as a country on what we see? Of course, we have to understand and continually research on the strength of local customs and traditions, because uh, a lot of anthropological research has been done on indigenous cultural communities, but not much has been done to use these researches as a framework for understanding the Filipino people on how to move forward. Number two, the basic values of the indigenous cultural communities in the Philippines is consultative, consensual, and conferential. These core values have always driven these communities and their elders to making the right decision. If we apply this as a principle in nation building, whose primary purpose is always to look at the common good, then it is easier to create into reality the culture of peace that we have always been wanting to, at the same time eventually leading to a better nation by respecting and accepting our origins and our values as a people. Now, Bishop Tony has always said that there are three stages to personalizing the culture of peace. Of course, the first stage is the cognitive phase, which is being aware of these values and the importance of these values. The second phase is the affective phase, meaning the realization that we have to do this. And the third phase is the active phase, wherein one decides to do practical action. Or in active terms, this is the mobilization phase. So all of the three phases cannot operate singularly, and each one of them operates interconnectively to the other, because as one is conscious, is convinced that he has to do it, each of his actions being done reinforces his belief. And therefore, once you start the phases rolling, it will be in a continuous cycle. Now, since we have already discussed the culture of peace, then perhaps can the culture of peace be a framework for nation building? Yes and maybe no. But these are the following tips I'd like to share for those people who would like to continue in nation building. Of course, we do not have to rely on foreign ideologies to continue as a people. Of course, our inspiration from the first propaganda movement, when I say the first propaganda movement, this is the group that had started the propaganda movement. Among progressive groups in the Philippines, they they say that the propaganda movement is developed into three phases. The first propaganda movement was Jose Rizal, Bonifacio, the Katipunan, and those who have started the ideological roots in Europe, the Filipino propagandists. The second propaganda movement, they say, was the rise of the Partido Komunista ng Pilipinas, eventually becoming the CPP and PA. And then the third propaganda movement is when people got tired of these political ideologies and decided to create new ways of looking into politics. So you would see the development of the KP, the kilusan sa pagbabago. You would see the development of new alternative ideologies. So I would say that if we want to do a new framework for nation building, all we have to do is to look at the historical roots of how our politics develop. Number two, we have to consider the diversity of traditions, culture, and beliefs of our ancestors, specifically the indigenous cultural communities, because the values they have can serve as the primary values we have as a people as we move forward. To import foreign ideologies is most of the time disastrous, but to use what we have is more easier to facilitate. Third is we should always have the value of conciliatory instead of confrontational. Western values is confrontational. That is why if we look at Samuel Huntington, he always used the context of the clash of civilizations because the West believes that it has to confront other civilizations to overpower it. But on the other hand, Eastern civilization, the Philippines is actually part of the Eastern civilization. It is more conciliatory. Even our value systems are more conciliatory. That means that we are more open to consensus building and we are more open to being consultative. Before I close this, my end of the conversation, I'd like to share a few words from one of the founding members of the Bishop Ulama Forum, my mentor, the late Professor Dato Jumaani. He said that a culture of peace is impossible if we do not know ourselves, because such a culture can only be rooted in understanding who we are as a people and as a nation. And so to build a culture of peace, we must also build our understanding of our people and our nation. With that, thank you very much, and I hope that this starter for the conversation could be fruitful and that we would all learn from each other during the course of our discussion this afternoon. Thank you very much. Magandang hapon po. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Yusuf.
Thank you po.
With that, I would like to open the floor for our sharing of the learnings that we have, our queries, our questions, our comments on the presentation of our resource speaker. So we would like to make mention. I think we can call on again Dr. Leo or anyone from our students here, professors alike, present this afternoon. So this could be a very fortunate time
We will
to
discuss this
share
later. Meron kami report dito.
our own
We will
insights
discuss this later.
and
But actually, nagpunta
those
pa
that
kami
have
ng
been
signing.
shared by our
And then
speaker
I
this
asked the
afternoon.
engineering to compute expenses for the fencing. Kasi it's really necessary na ma-fence na ito dahil nakakatawa.
Maybe
Alam nyo, with after that presentation, If you recall, we had a presentation before by Ambassador Kalonge talking on the character and talking about how other people look at us being Filipinos. In this regard, I think the presentation of Professor Yusuf Morales again explained to us that our actions or our own perspective to ourselves have not been rooted into one, what we call this, one seed or one angle. We're looking or we're trying to address issues based not on commonality but on diversity, which in essence does not give us a societal unity, or as a nation we are disunited. There is one experience when I was still when I just entered in the service. I was born in an area where the community speaks Ilocano, but basically I'm from Laguna. During those experiences, the people will tell me, or some seniors will tell me, it's good that you are Ilocano or you speak Ilocano because the setup of the hierarchy favors that region or people that speak Ilocano. In the same manner as presented by Professor Yusuf, I would say that we're again looking in that perspective when we are trying to give solution. But I would like to ask, relative to this presentation, it will take a lot of efforts to explain to other people. But I guess the hierarchy, actually one reason why I was able to know Professor Morales is because he is helping me out being advisor with PNP Special Action Force, because I wanted our policeman in that unit to respond correctly to situation, or when they are thrown in an area. I think even Dr. Santos will agree with me. When we are fielded, ang description sa area is, yung mga tao ron are anti-government. Kalaban yan. Yun ang tendency presentation for men in uniform. And ang question ko lang is, aside from the normal dialogue that what we are having, what are the possible avenues do you think, Professor, that we can use to express this, to correct? I'm using the word correct kasi evidently it is obvious na madami tayong error when we crafted our efforts to establish peace. If I recall, the monitoring of our situation, I will take particular note on the South. We have the Malaysians monitoring, or what we call observers. And we all know that Malaysia itself has their own interests as far as the Philippine situation is concerned. So, is it possible that we do not have an external element in our pursuit for peace? Yun lang ang question ko for now, Professor.
Thank you po, sir. I'll answer it from three angles actually. Una-una, it's important for us to understand that there are some available mechanisms of engagement with communities. Like for example po, the Catholic Church has always established interfaith desks and interfaith activities in different areas. Each diocese and each I think each Catholic mission, each chapel has been mandated to engage in interfaith and intercultural dialogue with whatever indigenous community that is present in the area. Uh, One such experience I've personally seen is the Diocese of Pagadian, where all of its parishes have their own interfaith desks and engages directly with the Muslim and the Lumads. Meron talagang direkta silang engagement. And I have seen how effective it was when the PNP and the AFP just came in. Hindi na sila nag-create ng bagong forum, but they instead tapped it to be able to, because sa community minsan non-state actors have more social capital, because non-state actors have this image of neutrality, and therefore they are given more access to areas where normally people who are affiliated with government would not be able to come in. So that's one angle. The second angle, of course, is I know for those who are in the uniform service who are familiar with the CMO and the PCR concept, the community relations engagement. So this would also allow uh, an opportunity to excuse me. So
Go
it
ahead,
would
go ahead, bro.
it would allow us an opportunity to be able to engage directly. Uh, Community relations approach, meaning going to the ground, engaging directly with the leaders. Now, the third angle where I would be coming from is it has always been a challenge when deployment goes on the is being done, because the perspective of uh, anti-government ang mga yan. When in fact, since time immemorial, traditional leaders, kasi the uh, IP and Muslim communities have three types of leaders generally, aside from the regular politicians. These are the cultural leaders, the traditional royalties, and then what we call the community shamans, the babaylan. So among the Muslims, this is the imam. Among the Subanen, this is known as the magtatawal. So the community shamans, the datos, who is the traditional leaders or royalty, and then cultural workers are the ones who engage in cultural work, the ones who teach the rudiments of learning among their people, the custodians of IKSP. So when we engage generally with them, normally these people are not anti-government. In fact, may principle yan na whoever is in power on top, generally they attach themselves to these sources of power. So, ang wisdom behind is it is easier to engage with traditional and cultural work leaders in the community rather than with the traditional politicians in the area. Mas madali na, they are more prone to telling you the truth than the traditional than the politicians in the area, kasi the politicians have the next election to worry, whether barangay kapitan ito, kagawad, or mayor, while the traditional leaders such as the Dato, the Sultan, or the Timuay, kung sa Subanen yan, ang concern nila is how the survival of their people. So when we engage with them, mas madali actually ang traditional leaders kausap. Kasi mas magsasabi sila ng totoo. Not that I'm saying that politicians do not tell the truth, pero if you want to easily engage with them and learn easily yung sikreto, you go to the traditional leaders. Mas mabilis silang uh, makadaog pampalad. And once you have the traditional leaders, you already have won the battle. Pag sila yung hawak, sila yung kasangga mo, mawawala na if the rebels are there. The insurgents most likely would either try to win them back or would leave the area. So I hope that answers the question, General. Within yung sagot ko po. Thank you po.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would there be anyone from the participants?
Gray ba?
Nahihiya ba yung mga graduate student natin?
Okay, Ariel Poy is raising, sorry. There are a reaction from Ariel Poy. A thumbs up. Okay. Raise hand. Go ahead, Ariel. You can unmute yourself.
Actually, nag-thumbs up lang ako, Doc.
Okay.
Actually, I agree with yung word ni Dato Sir Yusuf, because that's really agree because I'm also from Tausog tribe.
Okay.
So by that, Professor, is it the external forces or elements or like you said, foreigner is best just recorders, not observers?
Okay, sir. Actually, I am ever since before I joined the mainstream, I was already uncomfortable with our neighbors being so active kasi they have an interest. Their interest is actually Sabah, where there are some issues that we still have to thresh out with them on that. Should it had been Indonesia, medyo mas komportable tayo kasi we do not have any questionable borders with them, unlike with Malaysia. But this is one of the major issues of realpolitik, that when other countries come in and help us but has some their own personal interest, their own state interests, the settlement becomes more confusing. Like for example, right now, people in Basulta, a lot of them actually, to put it bluntly, did not favor the BTA extension. Kumbaga, it's actually the politicians who were saying yes, but people on the ground were not happy with the BTA extension because they felt that it was only the mainlanders, meaning people from the mainland, Maguindanao and Lanao, who were benefiting greatly from the BARM. So there was even an initiative for them that they wanted to have BARM B, meaning BARM to be split into two. So they were not happy with some of the political arrangements, but because the BARM extension has already been filed and I think almost done, so they have to wait for the next political concession that comes their way. It is not easy for us to to allow third country facilitators in, especially even if they are our neighbor and we have similar cultures, but when they have pecuniary interests at play, because it would tend to put us at a corner and at our disadvantage when we negotiate deals. Right now, we are unable to say anything about our territorial interests in that particular area because Malaysia has done so much for us to facilitate the MILF peace process. So talagang it's very very challenging. As a nationalist, it's quite reasonable, but as a peace worker, uh, we have to make do with what is available, but and hoping that we will not suffer in the long run, because as of now there are around 50,000 halaws who still do not have any document, who have traditionally come from the Philippines but 5 generations later have settled in Sabah. So yun, those are the challenges on that part.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Doc Ramon is raising his hand.
Yes,
Hello,
thank you.
Doc.
Good afternoon to everyone. Professor, I'm just curious. Ano ang role ng forgiveness and justice for a sustainable environmental of peace?
Actually po, thank you for the question, sir. Actually, sa indigenous culture, sir, restorative justice means that justice must always go with forgiveness. Forgiveness, halimbawa po, I will use the sama bangingi, yung kasi I always use a reference point whenever we talk about that. So sa sama bangingi, forgiveness must come together with restitution. So for example po, sa customary law ng sama bangingi, for example, if he destroyed a fishing ground, sinira niya kasi ano yun coral reef, tapos papunta dun sa seagrass, sinira niya, under customary law, ang punishment sa kanya is confiscation of his properties. Pangalawa, obligado ang kanyang pamilya to repair the reef and the fishing ground that he has done. So always yan sa indigenous peoples, justice, forgiveness is also hinged on one's sincere intention to do restitution dun sa problemang nangyari. Unless there is that, then justice and forgiveness cannot go hand in hand. Kailangan meron dun sa tao na yon, kumbaga. Kasi sa indigenous peoples, when a crime has been committed, it is not simply committed by one person. It means that the clan behind it is also obliged to do restitution. Hindi man sila ang may kasalanan, but a member of their clan has done the crime, therefore it is obligatory upon them to do restitution for the forgiveness of that person, if he is going to be forgiven. So yun po. I hope it answers your question, sir. Thank you very much po.
Actually, Professor, katulad niyan, how do we, ang problem kasi, dun sa nababasa ko lang is, number one is, no one is asking forgiveness dahil takot siguro na hindi siya i-forgive. Very deep yung resentment kasi lives were lost, properties were lost. So anong role ng justice, reconciliation, and forgiveness dito sa, for example, sa peace building natin sa Mindanao?
Actually po, sir, asking for forgiveness has never been easy. Like for example po yung sa Sa TJRC, yung sa Transitional Justice Reconciliation Commission, they did the research on the massacres being done. They also did dialogue processes between communities. The dialogue has to go on first before the realization for forgiveness or asking for forgiveness comes in. Kasi po, wounds are not easy to open or to heal. So, sa experiences po ng mga kaibigan who are in the TJRC, like Professor Rufa Kagwakogyam and Muchashim Killing, yung part ng kanilang learnings po doon is the forgiveness part comes later. It is the part where openness first to engage in conversations. And whether this intention for forgiveness may come in or the community would decide to forgive them altogether. Kung ibig sabihin po halimbawa, yung sa Palembang massacre in North Cotabato, wherein the community said we would just like the government to admit that it had done something unjust to us and that they would do token restitution of what has happened so that we could forgive them and we can move on. So, process po yun, hindi po yun biglaan na forgiveness. It's a series of conversations and dialogues where both or one of the parties would be able to reach out. Yung sa case po ng Zamboanga Siege, for example, my own community, si Mariki, kasi that's our ancestral domain. Talagang ang nangyari po is our traditional heirlooms were looted, as in looted by some members of the uniform service. Reality po yon, pero ang ginawa ng community is we have decided on community healing, wherein hindi naman kayo ang gumawa nun, it was another unit. Help us rebuild our community so we can move on and we can forgive. So yun ang sa experience ng Simariki, which is different from the experience of Palimbang. Other communities also have their own experiences on restorative justice or transitional justice. Hindi po parehas lahat, but in order ang lesson learned po doon, for forgiveness to happen, dialogue should always start. Engagement and conversation should always start. And the key there is the openness to engage in dialogue and conversations. Kapag hindi pa po, pag sarado pa po, nothing will happen. There should always be an opening. So small it may be. Ang importante, there is an opening for that conversation.
Salamat, sir. Salamat po.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe this is I would like to also commend how you attack the topic, Professor Yusuf. No? So it was in the context of a socio-cultural education realm, no? It's apolitical, so it's something that we can really learn about, no, towards your point or advocacy on rebuilding peace. I am just curious as anyone here, no? So I hope we are not outsider to that group, no. But when we look at it, I like the term, no, consensus building. I like the term of the non-state actors working together. But I'm still looking into culture is dynamic. So if we can rebuild or build a culture of peace, what doable norms can we see? No, as an outsider of that, no, of that building there of peace, just anyone else here present, no, especially we are in the urban areas or in the city life, no, people here and looking at it, no, kasi parang kadalasan nangyayari, binabasa na lang sa news, no, yung participation ba, hindi naman kami talaga direct doon, no, but we are still part of that building culture of peace. So what doable, what norms are we looking into in that culture of peace, Professor?
Siguro iniisip ko kung sang lente ako sasagot eh. Uh, my answer would be is, it would be impossible to say it if you have not experienced it. So, unang-una, immersion is important. Unfortunately, because of COVID, antayin muna natin kung kailan pwede mag-immersion. But immersion is really important so that we would know what are the values that we need to inculcate. Ano yung mga reference points. Kasi po, mankind always thinks from his reference point. So, kumbaga yung sinasabi po ninyo, Prof, is ano yung dapat? Ang isasagot ko po sa inyo, hindi ko po kayo, I cannot tell you kung ano yung dapat ilagay. I think the best way of knowing what to put there is to experience it first so that you know what has been wrong. Isa po sa mga bagay, pag tinanong ako, what are the things you need to include? Ang una sasabihin ko po is, we have to put the value of, we should learn to agree to disagree and still remain friends. That's the first value. The second is, we should always have an open ear to listening to the values of different people. And then, number 3, I would always try to see what is the common basis of unity between us, whether we belong to the same culture or not. Other than that, yun, yung triple C pa rin. Consensus building, conferential, and common basis of unity. So, mas dun po ako tumitingin. I am unable to give you immediately something concrete because when you want to build the culture of peace, it must come from your own reference point. You are unable to develop that beforehand because you have your own bias immediately. But in order to break that bias, you have to see it first yourself down. Kasi, what are the most peaceful communities in the Philippines? Siyempre, yung mga untouched by urbanization, yon makikita natin doon. So perhaps doing a walk in the Sagada or among the Sambaleño communities na IPs, take some time doon sa mga Agta, Dumagat communities. Ako, my best lesson was with the Bajaws. The Bajaws and the Sama Bangingi are two subgroups. We are distinct, but we speak a similar language. If I want to wake up, I just go and stay with them sa lepa nila, engage in conversations. Minsan medyo hirap ako kasi masyadong malakas ang amoy isda doon sa mga areas nila, but it's a waking up call always. I always get back getting more sense after talking to them kasi they have very unique ways of making people from other tribes wake up. So that's just me talking. I don't know if may sense po siya sa inyo, but I hope something can be picked up from what I understand. Thank you po.
Thank you so much. I think definitely something we'll have to pick up from our conversations this afternoon. So thank you so much, Prof. Dato, Yusuf, for your time this afternoon. And let me go back to my screen. So may I call on to General Ramon Santos to acknowledge and give our appreciation to our source speaker, and followed by his takeaways and learnings that we will have this afternoon to live by. So,
Thank you, Doc Mac. Ano unahin natin? Take away o presentation?
ito muna.
Presentation. All right. My colleagues, friends, you know, it's a very special day for me. I thought the day would be, you know, it's a Saturday and ganyan. Hindi ko nga alam na mag-giveaway ako ng takeaway. But It's a personal privilege, honor for me to really present this, Professor Yusuf. So let me read this certificate of appreciation from our beloved Philippine Christian University for his invaluable insights as resource speaker during the webinar discourse session on the narrative and responses towards a culture of peace. We give you this day, 25th September 2021, and signed by our President Junipen Gauwan. We present the certificate appreciation to Professor Dato Yusuf Roque Santos Morales. Sir, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you po.
Alam mo, sir, sa takeaway, sir, I put some notes here. But initially, sir, let me just say that during the pakipalit nga yung yung screen doc map. Naalangan ako rito sa picture ko. yeah, itong picture ni Professor Yusuf. Anyway, Professor, I'm so happy that before the formal opening, you changed the topic, the word narrative to conversation. Kasi from there alone, yung narrative kasi is problematic already because that is your perspective, your own concept, your own version, and sometimes in the course of looking for solution, you have to defend that position of narrative. And I'm so happy that it was changed to a conversation like this. That is one. Another is a wish. It's a wish for me. I wish the principal actors of the conflict in basically in Mindanao, in Basuta, in Barna area are present and sitting side by side like the military, the police, the rebels, the community, the politician. I wish we are in a one room and listening to you. I agree with Professor Mac. You have presented a very complex area of our lives in such a way that hindi siya offensive. Ako, I cannot do that. I have learned many things from you, Professor. And that is my personal takeaway.
Thank you, sir.
I did not know that it is possible to present a 100-year-old conflict, a very painful history, in such a way that hindi siya academic na lecturing and giving advices and everything. It was so, sabi nga ni Doc, very political. Let me share some thoughts and perform my task as given by General our Dean, Leo Santiago. So isa yun, happy, it is a conversation. I think we will learn more if there is a conversation and not not to depend our own version of what has happened. I like this. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
Jen.
Sir, I like the initial history of Cobra effect. To me, that is the basic question or the basic sa kanina sabi ni Doc Ma, what are the doable? Be aware of the Cobra effect because there are profiteers of conflict and they are the ones who are already promoting this very subtle. Their knowledge and education has been used to promote to profit from this conflict. Economically, politically, maintenance of their own power. They are even the military. I agree with you that the commanders are profiting or nakikinabang sila sa conflict, but on a separate way. Very critical also to understand the history. This is a takeaway. And this is where the uniformed services is very much at fault. You will deploy people there without knowing the culture. pinapunta mo na lang doon na yung sundalo at saka yung police and others pumunta lang just to deploy. And from there, yun lamang mga body languages, yung the way you look at women, the way would you take the way yung even pagkain mo can be easily misunderstood as an insult to the tribe. In the same manner that the Tagalog will find insult in some form of languages of other culture. So from there, napakalaki ng simula na ng conflict. Promoting a culture of peace, sa totoo lang, as an academe, takot ako sa culture, Professor, sa totoo lang. Because when you use culture as a framework of solution, ano yun, generational ang tingin ko. Sabi ko nga, ang culture has to be, most of the things has to be forgotten para makapagsimula ka ng culture. And this is from my own readings naman dito sa peace building sa Mindanao. Kaya ka na natanong ko kanina yung forgiveness because I think one of the reason is we cannot forget the painful things, and given the emotions of people, yung painful experiences mo, yun ang nangingibabaw eh. Yun ang mahirap alisin. And I agree with you na the sustainable peace can be brought by bringing the culture, by having that culture of peace, that it is very, very possible. Yung sa framework, I agree do sa framework. We really need that framework. Pero ito ang aking tingin na Professor, kung I do not know. Siguro isang araw, si Dean can host a webinar conversation like this. Kasi isa lang framework ang ginagamit strategic framework. Pero walang framework on community building. Walang framework on a very simple relationship. Walang framework ng itong lugar na ito is by the culture of the people, the community. Hindi mo dapat yan pasukin regardless ng objective mo dyan. Hindi ka dapat tumungtong dyan. Merong mga artifacts na hindi mo dapat hawakan yan Walang framework na gano'n. Ang framework always is victory. And when we speak of victory, you speak already of destruction. Ako, I myself, given the choice, I would not deploy armed uniformed personnel there. Because ang culture ng military is destruction. In order for you to attain, wala sila ron sa level ng dialogue, something like that. I like very much yung focus dun sa Earth as entrusted to us. If only we can all agree that we do not own these things, but we are given the responsibility to take care of it, so that it is our fault if we give to our next generation a damaged good, kumbaga. Kailangan na merong ganun talaga. Ang isang wish ko sana, madala ko si Professor Yusuf in a fireplace, in a cold area, magandang weather, with the red wine, with some friends. And I am sure, yung policy making kasi ang maganda Yung si Professor Yusuf has the excellent skill of triggering the nerve for thinking, for expanding your horizon. Yun ang impact sa akin ni Professor Yusuf. Ang isang curious ako ron can we bring peace by ourselves? Tayo lang. Tayo na nagsuntukan, nagbarilan, nagsakitan. Cannot somebody, an elderly, nasabi niya, pipito siya, sandali, pwede ba maupo tayo at magano? Is it possible? Kasi ang tingin ko, the peace that can arrive or can come out of that, na tayo ang nag-usap, tayo na nagkasundo, tayo ang nagbigay ng patawad, mas lasting, mas solid, mas strength. Para bang kami nga magkakapatid, nagkakaroon ng samaan ng loob. Pero ngayong matanda na kami, we have to sit down and said, okay, hindi naman mahalaga yung 40 years ago ninakaw mo yung aking gamit or something like that. We are closer now with the realization na gano'n. Hindi ko alam kung possible yun sa gano'n. Kanina naitanong ko yung forgiveness. palagay ko mahalaga yung justice talaga. If we will take off the yung justice, how do we deliver the justice to the people? And how can the people forgive? Madaling mag-forgive kung kinuha mo yung relo ko tapos binalik mo sa akin, okay. Paano kung ang pinatay mo yung mahal ko sa buhay? Inalis mo yung aking mga historical. Napakahirap. I do not know. Yung causes ng conflict, napakaganda ng presentation ni Professor Yusuf. Kung ako magpipresent nun, very, very painful, tangible, very graphic and everything. And yet, yung ginawa ni Professor Yusuf ng how to present yung causes of conflict, yung kanyang framework na 5, very awakening. Balik ako doon sa una kong statement, how I wish yung principal actors naririyan. Sana naririyan si Digong, naririyan si buti ngayon na tahimik na, but I wish the elders of the MILF, MNLF, the NPA, sina Joe Masison, sina nasa isang condo unit tayo, and Professor Yusuf would be presenting again his presentation niya. Palagay ko we will come out as friends, not as enemies. Thank you, Dean, thank you, Mark, thank you, Professor. I really I have on my in my heart I learned many things. I heard many things from your discussion. Thank you po. Salamat po.
Thank you so much, Doc Ramon. That was a bullseye, synthesis and takeaways. So, salamat po. And I think we deserve a photo op bago tayo end ng ating program. So I have here 3 screens. I hope you can join me with your 5 minutes or 5 seconds pala of your smile, so we can take this documentation together with our resource speaker. Okay. Salamat po. Okay. Pa-open na lang ha. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. I have the second screen. Pa-open lang po. 1, 2. And then my third.
Picture tayo.
Okay. Maraming salamat po. And let me go back.
Pasalamat lang, tapos na.
So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let's continue to build an agile building of a culture of peace. So maraming salamat po sa pagdalo. Good afternoon po sa lahat. Salamat.
Thank you so much, Prof. Patawag ako sa inyo mamaya.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you din Mayong. Doc Ramon, salamat.
Thank you po.
I hope yung iba dinownload niyo yung chinel ni Professor Yusuf. Baka may reaction paper yung professor niya.
So marami pa po tayong gagawin na ganito.
Thank you.
Sa leadership ni Leo at saka ni Dr. Ramon. So,
Dr. Santos, thank you po. Bitin, sir. Sana sa susunod, round table discussion.
Oo.
Organize tayo nun.
Yes, matagal na binabalak yan ni General Santiago round table discussion, pero meron pa